Absolutely. Everything we do, in principle, should be following a theory of change. Because if we don't have one, we don't know where we're going. We don't know what we're trying to achieve. We don't know how we're going to measure our inputs that are achieving outputs and outcomes and impact. So we must always have a theory of change in everything we do that we invest in on behalf of Sarah. Because if we don't, we're wasting opportunities for Sarah. We're wasting. And we're not holding ourselves accountable. So it's very important to have a theory of change. So, in the TMA process, we have a TMA framework. And what we're proposing to you today is that this TMA framework gives you the outline theory of change for your market development work, your TMA. So basically, this is the framework that you can use to hang and build your theory of change on for the intervention you're doing. So in sanitation, if you are going to do a sanitation initiative, ideally, you would think, okay, I have a framework, TMA framework. I need to build out a theory of change for my sanitation agenda. I can use this to help me think about the logic, the flow of what I do, what we do. And I think for people who in PSI who've been around for a while, there are elements of this that you should be quite familiar with. What typically in PSI do we have at goal level? All our goal frames in principle have. I heard about it here. Health impact, exactly. Goal is pretty much always standardly health impact. Purpose level, what do we have a purpose classically in PSI? Fair. Behavior, and whose behavior? Sarah's behavior, exactly. The target audience. Sarah's behavior. Sarah is our target, our primary target audience. We can have secondary target audience. Sarah is the person we want to influence the behavior. So great, we're familiar with this, the bones of this framework. It's pretty standard, and always we have activities at the lower level of intervention. But what we're talking about in the TMA approach, total market approach rather, is that the middle bit is built out. It's more complex. What we're saying now is that we're doing market system change to influence Sarah's behavior and support Sarah's behavior, increase her use. So that middle section is built out, it's more complex, and in that middle section, we're saying that there are players in the market whose behavior we also have to influence. So we're going to now unpack that a little bit more. What does that mean? So what it means is when we do a framework, when we have a theory of change, whenever we do anything, we're asking questions, we're asking key questions. And anyone working the evidence agenda, it's all about questions. So the key questions in TMA are, who is the market failing? How is the market failing? Where do we work in the market and how do we get there? So what we're saying is in our TMA process, we have a framework, we have key questions we want to answer. And we believe if we answer these quick questions, we will be able to build out our theory of change. Does that make sense? So the first question, who is the market failing? This is the big question for PSI always. Who do you think the market's failing for, normally in our world? Sarah, exactly. So Sarah is who we're worried about the market failing for. And so it's the same in TMA. But there's a little bit of a nuanced difference in TMA and how we think about Sarah. And I'm going to hand over to Yasmin now to explain that little bit of nuanced difference.
What we're trying to do in TMA, and I think we haven't rigorously done so in the past, is it's about a lot of sellers who could potentially use the product and service. We have talked about targets and we talk about scale, but they all need a denominator. And I think that's what's been missing. So it's this universe of need. And we're going to have a whole session on it from our program analytics team that's been leading the thinking on this, Amy Radcliffe and her team, and Megan's here to present. But very simplistically, from a marketing perspective, it is about everybody who can use your product and who should use your product. We put all the Sarahs together, we get the market potential. And when we see the Sarahs who are actually using, we get the actual market. So we get our use over need, Sarahs who are using, by all the Sarahs who should, and that's why we're trying to increase use over need. And there are two questions when we ask who the market is failing. Two ways we can look at this. One is, who are the Sarahs who are not using? That's who the market is failing, actually, in its most blatant form. It's failing the Sarah who's not using. And if we add lenses of age and gender as relevant, and in wealth quintiles, in geography, urban, rural, or risk behavior in certain cases, like HIV, then we will be able to describe who this market is really failing from an equity perspective. This is about making the markets work for Sarah. But it's also the Sarahs in use. And this is very important when we look at things like family planning, but also when we look at sanitation, because if we are not able to sustain that use, then we will be failing this market. If we can only meet that use today in a way that's not sustainable, we will be failing that market. So it's two ways we ask this question of who that is. And our goal is to increase use over need. You cannot increase use unless you sustain current use, and you cannot increase use unless you add new users. So that's how we're looking at it. This definition of broad definition, each time for each health area gets customized. And you'll see examples from HIV, from family planning, sanitation. We're trying to do this across every single, whether it's malaria diagnosis or treatment, we're trying to do this at PSI for every single health area, where we look at the population at risk, we look at the number of products or services, or sometimes products and services that they need, and we look at where we are with use in these ways.
The second question we ask in TMA, as we think about our theory of change and design our project, how is the market failing? And we saw earlier, we have this market system diagram. And so classically in the past, we think about how the market is failing for Sarah in the sort of sphere of supply and demand at the center. And now we're saying, with this emphasis of market system, it's how is the market in this enabling environment failing? We're going to think more about that, because that has big influences on supply and demand, which in effect influences increased use for Sarah. So the whole market system has to be understood. We've got to understand how the broader market system is failing for Sarah in our TMA approach. And then we decide where do we work in the market. So we understand that the market has influence. There are points in the market that aren't working. Where do we work? So again, classically in PSI, where do we normally work in the market? Yeah, we tend to work in the center, at the sort of interface of sort of supply and demand. And we use the 4P leverages to really influence that center of the market, supply and demand, influencing Sarah. Very much in the center with the 4Ps influencing it. So what we're saying now is, if you're looking at that supply and demand, it's not just about that interface that we're used to. We need to go much deeper into the sort of supply chain or value chain of supply and demand. Again, I'm going to hand over to Yasmin to talk about how we're thinking about that in TMA, that extra level of thinking.
I mean, looking at the first describing the market, I mean, I really like the point Des said, right? This is about really understanding these concepts and getting the meaning behind it, so that when you're talking about it with external partners, we're using the same language. We should begin by describing the market from Sarah's point of view, all the Sarahs. That's really total market. And right now, if you talk to anybody about total market approach, any of our other partners, they don't start with Sarah. They don't even end with Sarah, but they certainly don't start with Sarah. They don't start with all the Sarahs in the market. And this is the total market. But to make this market happen, we know we need to work through the market players. And we need some organizing framework for these market players, right? We saw that. They are the ones who work on demand and supply. And we came up with the organizing framework of production to use. Everything goes from production to use. Sometimes the production doesn't happen in your country. Sometimes it's not necessarily directly linked, but everything goes more or less from production to use. What should be done is to customize that production to use. In this example, we've customized it for a typical product that we bring into a country. We've got manufacturers, the manufacturer isn't in your country, we've got importers, it then goes through the distribution network, wholesalers, goes to providers, whether they are outlet providers or service providers, to consumers. Two things we get when we prototype this. First is, people say, where's government in this? Where's the public sector? Is this only private sector? This isn't about sectors. Sarah doesn't see sectors. We make that because we need it to organize the market in a certain way, and it's artificial. Very often, manufacturer is a commercial sector. Importer can be a central medical store of a government or an NGO, as we often are, and then your distribution system can be multiple. It is not clearly demarcated as sector. So if you have an importer that's a government, central medical stores, it's right here. If the government is an actual service provider, as they are, whether it's a referral hospital or a clinic or a community-based distribution agent or a traveling malaria worker, any of that, it's right there in providers. There's a lot of levels under this. What the point of this value chain is to help understand the infrastructure of the way a product or a service gets to Sarah. The second question we often ask is, but this is only, this only works for products. What about services? And I think that's another sort of false dichotomy we've done here, because we started with our condom thinking. But if you take condoms on one end of the spectrum, and let's put cervical cancer at this end of the spectrum, and let's put implants and IUDs somewhere in the middle, which is a product and a service? Is male circumcision entirely a service? Is there no product involved? Well, our team will tell you a lot of time is spent procuring those rings. I will do the male circumcision. Is IUDs a service or a product? Is HIV self-testing? I think we need to go beyond that. And again, from Sarah's perspective, it's an experience. It's about what she consumes as a product or a service, and sometimes more. But this infrastructure that we draw out, and this should be customized every single time for your country, for your health areas, across sectors. The idea is to first understand the value chain and who are the players, all the levels underneath of how this works.
So we must be disciplined about unpacking and building out this production to use spectrum, really understanding how the products and services do come to Sarah. And then, once we've understood that sort of value chain, supply chain in the middle, we need to understand that enabling environment around it and how it influences that value chain. So this is where we talk about supporting functions and rules. If you have a supporting function or a rule that is really not working, totally affect and influence that supply chain in the middle. I mean, one that you can think about in particular is policy. If the policy is totally against the use of RDTs by pharmacists, and yet you know that's where Sarah gets her malaria treatment from, then that's a big issue for serving Sarah better. And that policy engagement is a fundamental thing we need to do to influence supply and demand and increase use for Sarah. And then what we have to think about when we think about these supporting environments and where we work is who else works in that space. And this is a really key element to this enabling environment. It's understanding the functions of that environment, and then who are the players performing those functions. Typically in the past, we think PSI should be doing most of it. If there's a policy problem, we can solve it. If there's a quality problem, we can solve it. If there's an information problem, we can solve it. But what we're saying with TMA is identify the functions that are important. Also think about who the players are that typically would play that function. Who would normally do quality? Who would normally do policy? And then think about their capacity and incentives to perform that role. This is a really, really key thing for TMA. So, where we work in the market really depends on their functions, the players, their capacities, and their incentives to play in that market. So, back to the framework, that is the PSI TMA framework, and back to those questions that we should be asking ourselves to build out that theory of change. And I can hope you can see the links between the levels and the framework. So in principle, if you go through the process of asking those questions with rigor, you will be able to build out your theory of a change and fill out that framework specific to your intervention. So a framework just is the empty boxes. Until you use it for your intervention and build your own theory of change, it hasn't got substance. So you ask those questions about your market, and then you fill in the framework to create your theory of change. So the point of this is anybody thinking about working in sanitation, thinking about doing a design of a sanitation project, these are really critical tools for you to use. You ask these questions, you build out your framework, your theory of change following this framework. It's totally simplistic. And anyone working in sanitation will go, oh my God, it's never been more complex. It's a really complex agenda. It's true. And you will unpack that complexity. But what we're saying is, use these tools to help you manage that complexity. Does that make sense? So step one, sensitivity framework. We identify the health area we're working in, and we look at use over need. Step two, we will unpack the market, understand the market, identify the players in the market, and design intervention to influence them. That's 2 and 3. And then 4, we'll work out the work plan and then the need plan. Okay, so process considerations. When we're developing an outline theory of change, try and follow the PSI TMA framework. It's a great tool. It is the way we think about TMA at the moment. It's a useful tool. You lead the theory of change at the country level. We support you in global services, but it's your market, you're engaging with it. You lead that process with your team, your marketing team, your evidence team. You should be responding to the market, but donors often have done a lot of the work in terms of landscape mapping analysis and priority settings and strategy settings. So when you do your theory of change and you build out your design, obviously the donor agenda and the donor perspectives are to be taken into account. Because ultimately also you have to convert that probably into a performance plan for your donor who's funding you. So when do you develop your theory of change and set your framework? Any ideas based on the steps that we talked about? Does it happen right at the beginning? Does it happen at the end? Does it happen in the first month, before the bid, or if you're getting funded? When do you develop your theory of change and your overall approach? You start it right at the beginning. You begin to think about the logic of what you want to do. You start with your health area and you identify you serve the needs of your target audience, and we're going to hear about that next. You have the TMA framework, but you basically, over the course of designing the project, getting it funded, continuing to design it, evaluating it, revising it, refining it, it's an ongoing, iterative process. It doesn't stop. It's basically the bones to your program, but you'll be manipulating the flesh on them and moving the bones around as you implement. But you have to have it from the beginning, from the outset. And sustainability. TMA, building healthy markets, is fundamentally about scale and sustainability. And you don't specifically have one sustainability metric. Sustainability metrics are throughout the framework, at every level. And we'll talk more about that as we go through the week.